Hi, I'm Tom Kimball.
And I'm Tracy Kimball. Welcome to MS Learn Online. While MS affects all of us differently, the one thing I think we all have in common is a feeling of uncertainty and a loss of control over our bodies and our lives. What we can take charge of, though, is receiving the care and treatment that we need.
This three-part series is called Medical Self-Advocacy, how you can advocate for the medical care you need and deserve.
In this episode, medical correspondent Kate Milliken sat down with Marion Brandis with the National MS Society's New York City chapter. They talked about getting more from your healthcare team.
When I think of self-advocacy, I think about empowerment. I think about somebody's ability to articulate for themselves what it is they need and who they are. What you need has to always be in the context of really who you are. What you like to do in your life and what quality of life would mean for you, and what's important to you. And you have to advocate for, one should advocate for oneself in all the different realms of life. So physically, in terms of wellness, and spiritually and emotionally and intellectually and all of those realms. So all of those things really need to be addressed if someone is going to be truly self-empowered in seeking medical care or just a good quality of life in general.
Awesome. Unfortunately, in the world of MS, in kind of more progressive states, there is a point where sometimes a doctor will turn to a patient and say, there's nothing we can do. What would you recommend to that patient or that person who's in that state to move forward as an advocate for themselves?
Right. I'm always saddened when one of our members tells us that my doctor said to me, there's nothing more I can do for you. That makes me very sad in my heart because I know that that's not really true. Well, it may be true that that clinician really has nothing more they can offer that person. So I often explore with that person, maybe there's another clinician you might want to investigate being cared for by. Is there another system of care that might work for you better? MS care is a very complex situation for a lot of different reasons because it is such an intensive disease to work with and to treat people with. So sometimes a single practitioner, and this is not at all meaning to be to overgeneralize, but sometimes a solo practitioner or somebody who's seeing many different kinds of neurologic illnesses doesn't have the resources to really care for the person through the entire trajectory of their illness. So sometimes a different setting. The MS specialty care centers are often a good example of a setting where somebody who is progressing more with their disease will be able to go and find clinicians who will say there are lots of things we can do for your illness. So I really don't, with the right person, I don't believe there's ever nothing that can be done. There's always a piece of equipment that could be helpful to that person to assist them in their activities of daily living. There's always some kind of support out there. There are legal services and employment services, and many of the things that we have at the chapter, we're very fortunate in New York to have a lot of those services. But even if it's not within your chapter or even within your doctor's office, reach out into the community, find out more about your community resources. And really an MS specialized nurse is one of the best people to help coordinate those kinds of services, but again, not everybody has access to that. So I guess my point is, if somebody has a clinician who says, you know what, there's nothing really more I can do for you, your disease is progressing and your treatments aren't working so well right now, then I would say be very skeptical about that answer and look further, and this is the place where self-advocacy comes in. It's so important. You know, that patient knows who, that person with MS knows who they are. They know what their life has been and who they've been. Who were they before the disease? Who have they been over the last number of years as things have changed? What are their roles? What things have they lost? What are they missing? And then question really, is there something that can fill those gaps in and bring me back closer to the quality of life I was living before, to that meaning that my life had?
So let's pretend that I'm someone with MS and that I'm really shy. And I do have MS, but I'm not shy. So let's say that I was. What would be the thing that you would tell me to do to say, hey, you know, you have every right to be an advocate. Here are some of the things that you could talk to about your doctor to step up to the plate for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think it's really important to find some means that's comfortable for you. If speaking is not the means in particular, speaking off the top of your head, for example, you might want to think about making lists for yourself that you would bring with you to a medical visit so that your goal really would be, even though I'm a shy person, I need my doctor and or nurse practitioner, all my clinicians to really understand who am I at my core, so that they can really tailor the treatments, whether it's the actual medications or other kinds of recommendations and referrals, and how they really look at me as a whole person, tailor them to me. So if I can't speak, which sometimes I have that issue, sitting in front of someone with a white coat, I get a little tongue-tied too, believe it or not. So often I bring in a list. I'll write down the things that I know are of major concern to me that are my priorities. Now those priorities of mine may not be the clinician's priorities, so it's always a little bit of a dance there. You know, how am I going to get that clinician to really listen to me? How can the patient get the clinician to really listen to them, to understand what matters most to the patient, when the clinician also probably has a medical agenda for that person?
And let's talk about it from your perspective, because you're a nurse and you deal with people with MS all the time. So tell us how it helps you to have a patient that's an advocate. Does it make your job easier?
So it does, it really does. If the person, actually very often when people get to me at the chapter, it turns, their question, it seems to begin with, the reason that they called us seems to be some kind of a medical question. But what I often find is that in engaging them in a conversation and asking them, again, from that place of curiosity, a little bit more about who they are, how did they come to us, what else is going on in their life, that sometimes it's not the question they thought they were calling with. So the empowerment comes in the fact that they reached out. They knew something was bothering them, that they wanted more information, more support, more something. So they reached out to us, and then I'm able to respond to them by helping them sometimes just navigate the medical system, or just navigate around what their issues are, and connect the pieces for them, and help them really, in fact, help them understand better why they called.
Yeah, I almost feel like there's something about advocacy that really introduces a real personal element to the whole process of going through the disease. You know, instead of just medical, medicine, technical, clinical, that advocacy kind of introduces a whole other field to the process.
Right, and I think it's important as much as we can, or at least for me, from the perspective I come from, to demedicalize the illness sometimes. There's so many, as we said before, there's so many other aspects of living with MS that don't just have to do with the disease process and treatment, but just it reaches out into so many other aspects of a person's life. So again, knowing a person in that sort of holistic sense that we like to talk about in nursing is good medicine too.
Wow, Marion, thank you so much. It's so nice to hear somebody from kind of the medical side be so positive and encouraging for people to step up for themselves. So I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
You know, Ms. Brandis really makes some important points about self-advocacy.
I agree. And I know that when I take a more holistic approach to my MS, I feel much more in control of my body and my life.
Our series on medical self-advocacy continues with episodes on palliative care and disability care centers. Be sure to check them out.
Thanks to Marion Brandis for helping us to understand how we can get the most from our healthcare team. And thank you for joining us on MS Learn Online.